Hello, everyone. This is Fabrice Guerrier with Syllable, and I wanted to make a review of Lovecraft Country. Um, and I think it's a very compelling TV show because it really brings like different aspects of history in a very fantastical way. So we're able to really understand how the historical processes of like black people in the South or in the North or even in that time in the United States. I love the beginning of the show because you have no idea what the show is going to be about. And it starts with this baseball person who is like shooting it. And then there's this sort of war and these explosions, these aliens. And you start to realize, like, wow, is this going to be the show? And then you figure out that this is actually the main character is reading from a science fiction book. It's the pulps, and the entire journey follows the protagonist as we figure out he's the descendant of a secret line of wizards, and his mom is a slave that ran away, and there's a lot of these secrets that are or interwoven in the plot. I really like the that show because it really like I think it was a book at first, and it was a book that was adapted, and I think all of the chapters or all the episodes, and it's so intensely well done in terms of the process. I remember, I think the most impactful part for me was the Tulsa massacre, and just that entire scene was really intense. The scene with the grandma and the grandma asking what, like, why do you need this? Why do you need this book that they're looking for, and they're going back in time? I think overall it's really, I highly recommend it. I think my after the Tulsa massacre, I would say that the other thing that I really enjoyed was I forgot her name, Hippolyta, yes, Hippolyta, and just her entire like character. I think that might have been my favorite character in her journey as like transcending and going across time and space and understanding like womanhood and what it means to be an interdimensional being that's able to perceive past, present, and future. Um, Oh yeah, I think that was probably one of the most compelling characters. I also really liked I forgot the name, but it's this cuz is the sister of the main uh female protagonist, and how she's able to really like become this other person. I think she turns a white woman, and she's able to express all these things that she wanted to express in a very segregated time and racial time. I think what the show does well, it really speaks to. I think in terms of the book and the show, it really has a traditional plots like the journey to the end of the earth, or time traveling and meeting your past self, or this hidden society and the magical processes in it. I think there's a lot. There is so much packed into this show that it's pretty enjoyable. I think it's so compelling. It is a bummer that it was not renewed for a second season, but I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. I love the ghost parts as well, where they brought like the Haitian voodoo Mumbo, that she came and she was doing her rituals, and how that ritual protection even protected them from the antagonist, the female antagonist, after her father passed away. But yeah, I think Lovecraft Country is very like poignant. I've always been a big fan of Lovecraft himself, despite his problematic views on race and people of color. I think that is the notion of cosmic horror that he brings to his writing has influenced me personally. But I do feel like the writer that wrote the novel Lovecraft Country, being inspired by Lovecraft himself, and also wanting to explore a lot of the racial politics and segregation and hypocrisy that exists in the United States in terms of our ability to connect with each other. I think the author did such a wonderful job. And I think the aesthetic of the adaptation, this filmography was also good too. I think what I would have loved to see, I would have loved to see a little bit less of the tropes, and really focus on the character, like the character really driving the story. I think the main protagonist did that, but I think at certain times, you almost felt like it was a little bit predictable. Because I think that's the problem with some of the tropes. It's like you have the science fiction, fantasy tropes, and because it's a trope, you can almost predict where it's gonna go. And I feel like it is a risk to innovate on those tropes because you always have this tension of the market. But I think Lovecraft Country had a level of predictability, and I'll say that. But I do think in terms of entertainment processes and in terms of like historical fiction, I think it's very nourishing, looking at like so the dynamics between the main female protagonist and the male protagonist, and how they both have emotions for themselves, or how the father and his sort of hidden life that he couldn't share with his son is about his homosexuality. I think that was pretty powerful too. I feel like overall, like Lovecraft Country is just such a, it's like I'm rewatching it right now again, and I think it's pretty dynamic. I think my only pushback would be is that the plot points in terms of the tropes that it initiates it was somewhat predictable. But I do feel like the overall arc of it, and towards the end and the final scene in terms of the power and the magic and battling the white woman, I think, and overall, like I think it was a good show. I would, if I were to rate it, I would give it a like an 8.1 out of 10 in terms of just how it resonated with me. But I think it could have been higher if because I think that's the challenge too, because a lot of adaptation, you follow the storylines of the novel. So they're not necessarily able to change the narrative, and I think it's an adaptation. I think the adaptation of it was well done. So yeah, please definitely go watch it. Leave some comments below what stood out for you in Lovecraft Country. And yeah, and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks for tuning in.